Welcome back to another episode of the Jordan Checker podcast, where today we're going to be talking all things nutrition. So my top 10 nutrition tips, specifically revolving around weight loss. But of course, within this, there's going to be so many things that are of value, regardless of whether you're on your weight loss journey or not. There's going to be a bit of education in there. There's going to be some actionable things that you can take away from today as well. So really, if you're on your weight loss journey or whether you're just on your health and fitness journey in general, listen up. Plenty of golden nuggets in here for you today. So first things first, I want to preface this whole conversation by saying fitness is not your life. It's simply a part of it. Now, I think in the world where we're absorbing so much information from social media and we're absorbing so much of other people's lives from social media, it's easy to compare our fitness and our health regimes in comparison to someone that is their whole life. Example, a bodybuilder. For the blokes out there, it might be a Chris Bumstead, or your favorite Gymshark athletes. For the girls, Gymshark athletes as well, or these big name people in the industry. And what you have to remember is literally their whole life revolves around fitness. For me, as a personal trainer, most of my life revolves around fitness. I'm in the gym a lot in the morning. It's easier for me to get into the gym because I'm literally already there for work. For these other people, it is their livelihood. So you have to always remember that when comparing your routine, comparing your results, and doing all these things. Now, we obviously know comparison is not a great thing to be doing in the first place, but it's inevitable. We all do it, and it's likely going to be a thought that comes across your head. So just make sure you keep that in mind, and remember that fitness is not your life. It's simply a part of it. It's a very important part of it, but it's not your whole life. So always keep that in mind. Moving on to number 2, we're going to talk about the accuracy of the body mass index, or the BMI. So obviously, a lot of the GPs, a lot of doctors, a lot of people in general are going to give advice whether you should lose weight based on your BMI. That's kind of one of the more common metrics. And I think it's coming to light a little bit more these days that in trained athletes, trained people, it is not necessarily the most accurate measure. So I'll give you my example, which might shock a few people. So I have a BMI of 26.6, which is overweight. I'm 181 centimeters, 5'11", 87 kilos, and to be considered healthy by the BMI, I would need to be 80 kilos. So I would have to lose 7 kilos. Now, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I stepped on one of those not so accurate body fat scanner machines, the in-body scans, I think they're called, where you chuck your hands out to the side, you got your feet on the machine there, and it said I'm about 5% to 6% body fat. It was kind of the measure I was getting. I did it multiple times, socks on, socks off. I did it on multiple days where I had drank water recently before, gone to the toilet, all these things. And my measures seem to consistently sit between 5 to maybe 6.5% body fat. So that's not an enormously high body fat percentage. Once again, without tooting my own horn, I still managed to hold on to having a six-pack to some extent. So clearly not overweight. But what we can see here is that it is not accurate when it is used on someone that has gained muscle, or lean body mass, we would call that. Now, for some of you listening, just because you've been training for 3 weeks, maybe that doesn't cater towards you. So while it's not the world's most accurate thing, also don't use it as an excuse as to why you are where you are. Maybe it's true. Maybe you do need to lose weight. And for people that haven't really trained much, or they're not athletes, they don't have above average lean body mass, above average muscle mass, it's probably going to be a decent guide and a decent measure. And, take it with a grain of salt. If I looked at it and it told me that I was overweight and I was obese or whatever, I would then go, let me analyze this data, look at it, look at myself. How am I feeling? What's my body fat percent? All these other factors as well, and look at that and then reassess, because there may be some truth behind it. In my scenario, no, I'm not going to take it and try and lose weight. In fact, I'm doing the reverse. I'm actually trying to gain weight. I'm trying to get up to 90 kilos and still maintain some level of leanness, which I think is really attainable, because I'm not trying to do it in 1 week. I'm doing it over a long time frame. So keep that in mind when, measuring progress by BMI. It's not always the most accurate. Now, when it comes to weight loss, we need to decide. We need to segregate the principle, which is a calorie deficit, and the methods, which there are thousands, I guess you could say, of different methods. And likely not one person has lost weight in the same way as someone else in a methodical point of view. In the principle, it's all exactly the same. Principle being the calorie deficit. So if we were to draw this on like a diagram, we would have the principle of a calorie deficit in the middle, and we would have all these lines of different ways we can achieve this. That would be the methods. That might be, intermittent fasting. That might be going low carb. That might be keto. That might be, not having lunch. That could be all these various factors, having a protein shake to swap out for one of your meals, whatever it is. There's so many different ways that you could achieve it, but we really need to understand that weight loss only occurs through that deficit. Now, once again, that's simple, not necessarily easy. And I like to harp this down because it's easy to kind of be like, just eat less. It's a calorie deficit. Just do that. And it's like, well, cool, it may be that simple, but if it was that easy, we would all just do it like that. It's obviously, there's so many other factors at play: our habits, our routines, our environments, everything. There's so relationships, work, whatever it may be, business. There's so much going on there. So I can respect, and I want you to understand, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but obviously with the right person helping you or the right guide, it can become easier. But yeah, at the end of the day, principle, calorie deficit, many, many methods in how to achieve this. So just because someone achieved it in one certain way, and this is the common thing in the fitness space is, just because I went carnivore and I lost lots of weight, that means you should do carnivore and you'll lose lots of weight. It's not like that. We're all different. And so therefore, what your methods are going to be to achieve that principle will be very different to the person next door to you. So always keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to calorie tracking, as point number 4, I like to preface this as it is our most accurate way of being able to measure your input of calories, input of food. Obviously, if you decide to follow a meal plan, that meal plan is built around your calorie targets. So while you're not doing the tracking yourself, the meal plan has been set exactly. It's still based on some form of calorie tracking. And so when we're scanning our barcodes, doing all these things, a lot of people can kind of feel like that's just, oh my God, it's obsessive, it's this, it's that, it's whatever. And that's why we need to kind of readjust and reframe our mindset going into it. So for me, I track my calories like there was no tomorrow. Every meal I ate out, every drink, even if I had an alcoholic drink, I would track that and all that. And maybe you could argue there was some level of being too obsessive with that, but it has got me to the point today where I don't track my calories. If I want to lose weight, I can very easily make adjustments because I have such a great understanding of food, and vice versa. If I want to gain weight, I know what needs to go up because I have a very good understanding of what's in food. It helps that I eat very, very similar things on a day-to-day basis. So therefore I can pull these levers very easily. If I wanted to lose a little bit of weight, then it might just simply involve me, shrinking the portion of my oats that I have for breakfast in the morning. If I wanted to gain weight, it might be a matter of adding peanut butter to my oats in the morning. And I might do like 1 or 2 of those adjustments. And then before you know it, there's 250, 300 calories up or down. And there's my deficit or there's my surplus. So having that consistency in what I eat, it works for me. Sure, I change the flavors of my foods, the flavor of the curry, the flavor of the stir fry, or the flavor of the yogurt. But the base is very, very similar. Now, coming back to that education word that I used there, why calorie tracking is so good is that education. You will likely, and I can almost guarantee you, even as someone, the longer I went through it, there was still some foods that shocked me. You might be like, holy shit, I didn't realize there was that many calories in that food, or I didn't realize there was that little protein, and all these sort of things. So you can start to gain this knowledge and understanding of what's in food. Then with that knowledge and understanding, when you decide to eat something, you'll be able to go, I went out and had a chicken palmy that night. So maybe that's 350 calories, roughly more than I would have had for my normal dinner. So tomorrow I probably need to adjust and be roughly 350 calories down. And that's where it can become quite a subconscious sort of thing. I find I'm at this level where those decisions get made without me really having to think about it too much. Sure, there's some level of thought, but when I go out for dinner and I overindulge the night before, I go, over the next couple of days, maybe I should balance that out a little bit as well. So by doing the calorie tracking and having that education, having that understanding, I now am where I am today. And that is the point where we don't have to do it forever. Now, if you're wanting to compete and do all those sort of things, a little bit of a different conversation. Again, you're probably going to have to. Some people do enjoy just tracking their calories all the time and they'll do it forever, whatever. That's cool. That's fine. That's also fine. I'm not saying it's bad, but a lot of people don't want to do that. So I always encourage that we track our calories early on. And we do it for, let's say, a month. And within that month, then we gain all this knowledge and understanding and we reassess from there. Likely, I'm going to try and see if we can track our calories for probably longer than a month, because that education, that real understanding takes time. Everything we constantly harp on this in all of our other episodes, whether it's in business, health, whatever, relationships, things take longer than we expect to get to the point of being an expert, as per se. So 4 weeks, though, it's a really good starting point so that you don't feel drowned out by how long we might have to do it for. You start with 4 weeks, reassess, maybe take a couple of weeks off, and then you go again. But once again, it's all very personal, down to you. But it's education, and it doesn't necessarily have to be forever. It is so much about just learning as much as possible. Now, within what we're eating on a day-to-day basis, probably heard the term 80% whole food, 20% soul food, those sort of theories. So that's really good, because there was a period where the industry kind of went to the if it fits your macros, which was ultimately eat whatever the fuck you want, as long as it fits within your macro targets, calorie targets, obviously, as well, if it's hitting your macros. So what that meant was you could eat literally fucking anything, which technically speaking you can if you still want to achieve your goals, but it's negating a lot of things to do with health as well. So weight loss, if that's your core goal, yes, calories are king. They are number one. They are what we focus on. But we also got to remember, like, food makes you feel a certain way. Food makes you perform a certain way. So you want to perform well at work. You want to perform well at the gym. Well, eating sugar and Snickers bars all the time probably won't leave you feeling too flash. I even find, say personally, eating too much of those, like the tortilla wraps or stuff like that, I feel pretty shit after having them. So this is all a part of the learning experience. You gauge that. And so while we could do that if it fits your macros, and we could achieve your goals by those extremes of not even eating well or high quality foods, the 80-20 rule gives us that some form of boundaries, because it is important. We need some guidelines, we need some guide rails, but it also gives us the flexibility to enjoy food as well, because food is an enjoyment thing. Now, a lot of people obviously say food is just fuel, but if we look back and we go over society, like most cultures gather around food. That's kind of a thing we do. So there is going to be some level of enjoyment to it. It brings people together. You're baking in the kitchen with your mom or your dad, and you're cooking on the barbie outside with your mates and whatever it is. So there's an element where food actually brings people together. It brings different cultures together as well. So we are allowed to have some level of enjoyment of our food. It doesn't have to be dry, plain, and boring. And sometimes that, you might have to be a little bit more rigid, and then you can free things up a little bit as well. But it's understanding that you can still have a bit of chocolate. You can still go out for a meal with your friends and have something that's a little bit higher calorie than you usually would. That's the 20%. That's where we make those adjustments. That's where I talk about how the next day you might change what you had based on the day before. And so it's really good, rough guidelines that you can follow. It's not to say you literally have to be 80% and 20%. You get the idea. It's just a rough guideline as well. Moving on to number 6. I harp on with my clients day by day about making the easy option a high quality option. So especially now, people are working from home. It's really, really easy. Fuck, I'm hungry. Or actually, you know what? Working from home is one thing, but when you're out and about, it's even harder again, because you don't actually really have the option to cook something. You're on the road, you're in the office. One of my clients, real estate agent, and he hasn't done his meal prep on the weekend. So therefore it comes to a Tuesday, but he's fucking starving. So he goes, shit. And so he just gets some takeout. The issue there was his easy option. He was only left with being takeout. And so that's going to be different to what his meal prep meal would have been. Doesn't mean he couldn't have eaten high quality, a decent meal, but it strays away from his guide and his plan. And so even if it was 200 calories more, if you do that on a day-to-day basis, we're starting to create this issue where we're finding it really hard to stick to something. So we got to make the easy option a high quality option. One way of doing that is meal prepping for lunches, could be for dinners as well, could be for breakfast, could be for snacks, could be the whole thing. You can literally prep and get ahead with those sort of things. If you don't like to eat the same food every single day, maybe you do for lunch, but then dinners, you cook for 2 nights and then 2 nights and then 2, and that's how you cycle. It doesn't always have to be 5 to 7 nights of the exact same food. You can still prep just a little bit extra, not too much extra as well. They could be frozen meals. And it also comes to the point of, if it's not in your cupboard, it's going to be way harder to eat. So these easy options that are high quality start when you're walking through the supermarket aisle. They start when you're ordering your food online to get it delivered to your house. So sure, we have Uber Eats and that can become an easy option as well, but a lot of the time it's also a time thing. It's not just the fact that it's right there, I can grab it. It's also the fact that I don't want to wait 40 minutes for my food to rock up. And that's why having the meal prep there ready to go is it's right there. It's 5 minutes in the microwave. I'm good to go. I can start eating it. So it really does start. If you don't have 10 blocks of chocolate in the cupboard, it's very hard to smash your chocolate. So buy what you kind of fits within that 80-20 rule, fits within your calories, fits within your goal, and then you can still enjoy that. But once again, if it's not in the cupboard, it's going to be really, really hard to eat it. Now, number 7 is going to be one that people seem to have their ups and downs about, but let me give you a few understandings as to why all calories are the same, but not all calories are equal. So a calorie is simply a unit of measure. And now when we talk about a unit of measure, we could similarly look at something like a kilometer. And like a kilometer, not all kilometers are equal. You could have a kilometer that's flat. You could have a kilometer that's uphill. You could have a kilometer that's downhill. Let's say you were running and you had the wind behind you for a kilometer versus the wind in your face. While the distance you traveled is still a kilometer, that doesn't mean what it felt like was the same. Because maybe you had an uphill kilometer into the wind versus Johnny next to you who had a downhill kilometer with the wind behind him. Which one's going to be a little bit easier? I think we know the answer there. So calories are much the same. So we have calories, that's our unit of measure. And then within that, we have other things that make them not equal. So satiety could be one of those. It's commonly known that some foods leave us feeling fuller for longer than others. And for some people, that's not always exactly the same for everyone. So, there's studies out there that would obviously say the averages, things like your potatoes, things like your protein-based foods, stuff with high in fiber, those sort of things, yes. But, we're all a little bit different at the end of the day. So the specifics might change from person to person. Then we have things like the thermic effect of food, which is the calories burned during the processing and the digestion of that food. So for protein, you're burning roughly 20 to 30% of the calories consumed just in the process of digestion. So you consume 100 calories of protein, let's say 25 calories have been burned just in that consumption. Whereas when we're looking at carbohydrates, we're looking at 5 to 15%. And when we're looking at fats, we're looking at 0 to 5%. So that's another factor where 100 calories of one is not equal to 100 calories of the other. But at the end of the day, a calorie is a unit of measure still. Then we obviously have the volume of food. If I had 100 calories of lettuce versus 100 calories of lolly snakes, we're talking about something that is like a few snakes versus like a whole lettuce. So you can tell there, that's why when we talk about try and have foods that are high in volume, low in calorie density. And so that's why people think that salads are so good, and they can be very helpful. I'm not saying they're not good, but salads, you have a salad with some chicken, and that's a huge bowl in comparison to a McDonald's burger, which may still have more calories compared to that massive bowl of food. So within that, we feel like we're eating more. It leaves us feeling fuller. It takes longer to eat because a lot of the time, we eat really, really fast. And because we ate fast, we kind of haven't allowed ourselves to be full, and therefore we go eat more. When if we eat a little bit slower, or we let ourselves sit with the food we've just eaten, we might actually find that we're fairly satisfied as well. And so sometimes then we know that food, we can start to eat out of boredom, and all these other factors come into play as well. So at the end of the day, a calorie is a calorie in terms of the fact that it's a measure, but not all calories are created equally. So I hope that makes sense. Now that kind of leads us into from the volume of food, the concept of eat more and still lose weight. So, when we talk, you've probably heard people talk about, I'll teach you how to eat more and lose weight. What they're talking to is trying to help you with the food choices you're making to try and assist with eating high volume of foods with low calorie food options. So one thing I think to keep in mind, and a good thing I like to make clear to people as well, is there's a lot of ways we can have these, low calorie options, all these sort of things as well. Whether that's the no sugar maple syrups, whether it's your zero sugar Cokes. And while I'm a big advocate of these sort of things, I would be careful to not overdo them. So I know for me, when I have consumed lots of these low, no calorie alternatives, it leaves my stomach feeling a little bit meh. So I think there's something to be said there again, that the foods we're consuming, just because they're low in calories, doesn't mean they're going to leave me feeling good necessarily as well. So there's all these other factors we have to play out. Sure, if you're going to have a Coke, I recommend having a Coke no sugar over a full sugar. That's another 200 plus calories or whatever it is that you could be eating, or 200 calories that then put you into a calorie deficit, and therefore you achieve your goal as well. So not all bad, but always consider the pros and the cons to these things. And I think a lot of the time, the negative for me personally, just anecdotally speaking, and a couple of people I've spoken to about this, my clients that I speak to about this, it's when you overdo it. It's not when you have a couple of these low calorie and the high artificial sweeteners and all those sort of things. It's when you have a shit ton of them that it does start to feel a little bit shit in your guts. And I'm sure, for people that are really dive into the gut health sort of stuff, that seems to be a space that people are talking about a little bit more, slightly beyond my scope. So, hopefully we can get someone on the podcast to talk about those things a little bit more in depth as well. Now, number 9, keto does not burn more fat. When we number 9 is the fact that people say keto burns more fat. It does, but what they're referring to, and what a lot of people actually get confused about, is it's not talking about body fat. What it's talking about is fat as a fuel source. So this is what we call fat oxidation. So fat oxidation, burning fat, is actually just using the fat you have consumed as your fuel source. Now, once again, I've pissed a few people off with this example because people don't want to be compared to a car. But if I was to, I've got a Tesla. I don't. Let's say in theory, I've got a Tesla. I've got an electric car sitting there. I charge that electric car with electricity. That's what's going into the vehicle. So what is that vehicle then using as fuel? Electricity. Pretty simple. If I have a combustion engine, I'm putting in petrol, or for your American weirdos, I'm putting gas into the car. So therefore, petrol is being burned to fuel the car. The same is with our bodies. When we consume a high-fat diet, keto, low carb, that is my fuel source that I have put into my body. Therefore, I'm going to burn more fat. If I consume more carbs, I'm going to burn more carbs. And this brings us then to the point also of, say, the fat burning zone, the fat burning cardio zone that people refer to. It's the same thing again. It's fat oxidation. It's burning fat as a fuel source. It's not actually burning body fat specifically. If we can't argue. If I went for a full out sprint for this, and I was sprinting at 100% for the same duration that someone was doing this zone 2 cardio, that you would be losing, and you would be exerting more energy, more calories. It doesn't quite work like that. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you're not going to get your knickers in a knot that I just compared you to a car. It is just an example as well. Number 10, measuring progress. So this one is pretty tough, and once again, it's a hard thing to balance, because I do understand the issue that people have with their body image and all these sort of things, or their scale weight is obviously a massive one. They look at that and they go, "Oh, this is sending me to a bad place." And so, if that's the case, there's a few options we can have, but we'll revert back to them in two secs. So the best thing we can do is weigh ourselves every single morning, first thing, empty stomach, before water, you name it. Literally hop out of bed, you stand on the scale. So that's going to be our most accurate way of collecting data, so that every day is fairly consistent. If you do it at the end of the day, you could have taken a massive log just before, you could have eaten a big meal, you could be more stressed, you could have been sweating, it could be hotter outside, it could be colder outside. All these other factors come into play, of which there are still some factors at play if we're doing it first thing in the morning, but it eliminates as many as possible, so it's our best option. And we have to remember, the reason why every day is good is because we have more data points. So it's not that I want you to care about your scale weight every single day. It's that I want you to step on the scales, measure it, log it, and use that data, so that when we come back at the end of the week, we can take the average and see how much that has changed over that period of time. Because we know there's still weight fluctuations. Like I said, weighing in the morning is not perfect. We'll still have weight fluctuations. For females, it could be around your period and your menstrual cycle. That's obviously going to play a massive role as well. So the averages become even more important for you. An example, let's say I'm 87.2 this morning, and then tomorrow it could be 86.9, then the day after 87.1, and then the day after it could be 87.4. And so, there's these fluctuations at play, but I take the average. And if our average is coming down, if weight loss is the goal, then we're on track. If weight gain is the goal, then the average is going up, then we're on track. Now, if you find it hard to still create that disconnect between the scale number from a day-to-day basis, but you feel like you can manage some time on the scales, what we're going to do is we're going to do 3 days in a row and then not do it for 4 days. Ideally, I'd probably do that, say, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. That way you're still getting a weekend day, and then you're getting 2 midweek days. We're getting 3 data points in a row, so that keeps the fluctuations a little bit tighter together. And then we come back in 4 days' time and do the same again. That way you're not having to overdo how often you're doing your weigh-ins, but you're still getting your weight and getting that average as well. Because if I almost avoid wanting to do it once a week, because it really can be quite damaging. If you weigh yourself once a week and you step on the scale and it's the one day your weight has fluctuated up and you think you've put on 250 grams and your goal is weight loss, that's very, very demotivating. You're going to be kicked in the guts. So that's why I try and limit the once a week. Now, sure, there's the flip side. You could step on the scales and you get yourself on your lowest day and you go, fuck yeah, I'm on. Chances are from 1 week, eventually you're going to find yourself pretty demotivated by the fact that your scale weight has gone up because of that natural fluctuation, which is completely normal, but it doesn't feel normal when that's the only time you've weighed yourself as well. So if that's the case, I probably wouldn't weigh, maybe obviously on even longer time frames totally as well. But then you've got other options. We can obviously use photos. So how many people have you gone to a family gathering or friends that you haven't seen in ages and they go, wow, you look so different. You go, no, I fucking don't. What are you talking about? But when we see ourselves every single day, so we don't see these changes necessarily adding up. And that's how, some people kind of go, I don't know how I just put on this weight. And, one day I woke up and I was like, holy shit, I have gained a lot of weight, because you see yourself day to day. And so you're not noticing these changes as much. Photos allow us to kind of step out like our relatives did and see our progress from a little bit more of a zoomed out view. So they can be really, really beneficial. Obviously we've got measurements. So not always is, your weight reflective of progress sometimes. So maybe you are building some muscle and your body composition is changing. So therefore your measurements might be a good way of being like, oh, my waist has come down, but my biceps have got bigger. Well, that's likely a good thing because you're packing on some muscle in your biceps. Your waist is coming down, which is probably suggesting we're losing some fat. So that's another really good way of doing it. But then there's the other things of how do you feel? If you're feeling better, that's a great progress metric. That's really, really good. If your clothes are fitting differently, that's a really, really good way of measuring your progress. It could be, how do you find everyday tasks are to do? The most common thing I find, and I absolutely love to hear it, is say one of my female clients, she used to struggle around the house and she needed to move a cabinet one day and her partner wasn't home. They couldn't do it together and she did it herself. And she goes, I've never been able to do that before. That's absolutely incredible. And you go, well, that's fucking an epic way of measuring progress. Is how is everyday life? How does it feel getting up and down a flight of stairs? How does it feel moving things around the house? How does it feel running around with your kids? There's so many ways we can measure progress. And so I like to make sure that we have at least a few of those. Once again, weight is really, really helpful, and weighing yourself on the scale is really, really good when weight loss is the goal specifically as well. But with that, we can still combine some of these other factors as well. Now, I hope that's covered a lot of the things that you're looking for here. Obviously, we could go down rabbit holes of all these things. We could talk about many, many other conversations, and there's so much more we can talk about nutrition-wise. So if there is other things that you're wanting to have answered, questions you have, do leave them down below in the comments, and I'll come back to them in a future video. But for now, if you haven't already, please do like and subscribe to stick around for future content like this and with all of my amazing guests, because trust me, we have some epic podcasts coming up in the next couple of weeks.